What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 2 of the Sports Media Student Podcast. I am your host, Rob Rose. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you could please, if you enjoy the podcast or taking anything from it, please subscribe to the podcast. Available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, any other places that you listen to podcasts. And please subscribe to the podcast, rate it, review it. Let me know if you like the podcast, or if you just want to reach out to me personally through DM or anything. Just shoot me a message and let me know what you think about the podcast. Any feedback would be good. Appreciate. I'm trying to learn how to do this. This is a learning experience for me as I try and teach some aspiring sports media students how to get started in this industry. I am also learning myself how to start a podcast and how to grow a podcast and everything. So any kind of feedback that you can give would be awesome. So with that being said, let's jump into this episode of the podcast. We're going to cover today is how to start your career. Seems like the only logical place for me to begin the podcast. The first real episode of content, episode number 1, was an introduction into who I am, what the podcast is, and what I want to achieve by trying to teach future sports media students, current sports media students, how to begin a career in this field. So getting started is the clear, obvious choice, like I said, for me to begin the podcast, because you have to get started at some point to have a career. So why not start the podcast with getting started? Before I kind of launch into some actual steps of how to get started, I want to start off this conversation by starting with a question of, why do you want to get into sports media? It's an important thing to ask yourself before you get started, because I think the answer that most people have is that they love sports. And, that's really something that everybody you're going to be competing against trying to get a job in sports media has. And if that is the only thing that you have going, then it's going to be an issue in terms of competing against everybody, because, everybody that gets into sports media loves it. So there has to be something else there for you. You need to have a reason why you want to get into the field, and not just that you love sports, because getting into this field is super hard, super competitive. When you start off, you're not exactly going to be paid extremely well. There are a lot of people that struggle to find jobs or have jobs for a while, and places, websites, newspapers, magazines shut down, lay people off. And, this is a challenging industry to get into, and even more challenging to stay into. And, some of your initial jobs are not going to be what you want to do for the rest of your life. And to stick through that and come out the other side, landing where you do want to, there could be a lot of time in between there. And there's going to have to be something in there that that gives you the motivation to keep going when it's a bit of a struggle, and you look to your friends that you went to high school or college with, and they went off and they did some business degree, and they've got a good job, and they've got a nice apartment and a nice car, and they're free on the weekends to go out and go to the bars, and they're they've got money to spend, but you work every weekend, you cover sports happen on the weekends most of the time, so you're working during the weekend, you can't make it to things, and you have to miss your cousin's birthday or whatever. And those are sacrifices that you have to make early in your career to put yourself in a spot where you can land a job um, where you have a little bit more flexibility. And just loving sports is not going to be enough to get you through, um, the tough times that are going to come there. I have one of my professors at Rider, Aaron Carter, uh, one of my mentors, tell me, to ask me this same kind of question. He wanted to know, why did I want to do this? Because, he told me a lot of the people that he graduated with, they were great writers, but there were only a handful of people that were still doing it, years later. And, it it doesn't it doesn't mean that they didn't love it, they didn't have a passion, they weren't good at it, but it gets to a point where for a lot of people where it just doesn't make sense anymore to them. There isn't something pulling them to it. And for you, if you want to make this a real career, you need to find that thing that keeps you there and makes you want to stick around and do this and put in the hours and the years and sacrifice the things that it takes to get there. For me, I love um, being able to tell someone's story, a unique story about somebody um, that other people don't know, and they in themselves maybe never really had any ambition to really tell. Um, but when you're able to find something unique, get the story out of the person, and then turn it into, you know, content that people take in and get a reaction from people. To me, that just keeps me going every time I get to find one of those stories and write a feature story that I really get excited about, where from the beginning to the end there isn't anything where I need to motivate myself to transcribe the interview or sit down and write the story. I'm all day long thinking about, how do I want to start the story? How do I want the outline of it to go? How do I want to end it? Which quotes do I want to use? You know, when I get that kind of story and I get response from people that they enjoy the story, and that it, you know, sometimes I get message from people saying that the story made them cry, and that is, as odd as it sounds, um, it's crazy for me to think that, I can come up with something in my mind about and write something that can make the father of a son who I wrote a story about cry. Um, and the ability to do that, and to have the power and the opportunity to tell stories about people that would never be told, you know, um, is something that means a lot to me, and it's something that I want to do with my career. My future goal is to be somewhere where I can travel around the country and potentially the world and tell stories of people, interesting, unique stories, people, and that's what motivates me to keep going when I get stuff that I don't want to do. I know there's something that I can do and that I love doing, and it keeps me going. So you need to find that thing for you, whatever it may be. You may not be able to figure it out in a day or two. It may be something you have to kind of think on for a while. Um, but I found the thing that, um, that kind of every time I get the feeling that my battery is starting to run low. I'm on, 1-2% on the battery of I've been working a lot. I haven't seen my family in, months. And, I get that story that comes in and it kind of charges me back up and it keeps me going. And you're going to need to find something that does that for you and why you do this, because loving sports is not going to get you there. Um, so kind of let that roll around in your head, but we're going to move on into actual ways to kind of get started. Um, some of them may seem like kind of obvious things, and there should be pretty simple things when you think about them, but it's not exactly easy for a lot of people to get started, because you may be thinking, like I was starting this podcast, who's going to listen to this? Who's going to care? Who am I? Why would anyone care to listen, read, whatever, watch if you're making videos? Um, why would they care about what I have to say? Um, and the only way that you can figure out if people do care or if you're any good at what you want to do is to just do it. And it's going to be bad in the beginning. I'm probably going to go back and listen to these podcasts in years and think, oh my God, this is terrible. I'm so much better at this now, or at least I hope I will be in the future. But, when I first started writing, it was really bad. And, I didn't know how to write. I didn't know how to write articles. I'd only written, essays in school. And, I didn't do any kind of writing. I didn't know any writers. But I just wrote. I wrote about fantasy football for websites that would take me writing for them. And I was just passionate about it, but I didn't know how to write. And it took just writing a lot and then going to school and learning how to write and getting internships and jobs and learning or how to write. And, it's just a time thing. So, if you're someone who's in high school right now and you think you want to get into writing, being a reporter, the easiest thing you could do is, if you have a high school paper, write for your high school paper. Um, easy thing to do. If you don't have a high school paper, same thing. You could start your own website, blog, whatever you want to call it. You can use WordPress to start a website for free and make it look pretty, actually look pretty good. I've used free WordPress websites before to do different things. And, if you're someone in high school, it's just good to, get the practice of learning how to write things and how to post things online and how to post pictures and everything. And just having the experience of doing that. And, you know, likely, unless you live in an area where you have, you know, Texas football, for example, where there's a ton of media coverage for a lot of high school football events like that, likely your high school does not have a ton of people covering them. I cover high school sports right now in York, Pennsylvania. We have, I think, 18 teams in our York Adams League that we cover in York and Adams counties. And, we cover a lot of the stuff that happens there. But if you went to one of those high schools, you could cover, almost everything that happens there. Um, you're in high school. If you're able to, you can go to the games, take a picture with your phone, talk to the athletes after, and most people are appreciative to have their stories told. You know, for the most part, people, especially when they're in high school level, they're not like athletes you see on TV that hate dealing with media because they've been dealing with it for years and they get sick of you know, different people taking their comments and doing whatever they want with them. And, um, at a high school level, kids are usually pretty excited to have their stories be told. And parents and family members are always excited to see their kids, get recognition for what they do. So, that's a pretty simple way to kind of get yourself started. You can, talk to your athletic director at your school and let them know, I want to start a website dedicated to covering, our sports teams. And more than not, I'm sure they'll be happy there aren't a ton of people there at the games. Most of the time, I just show up to games and I say, hey, I'm here to cover the game, show my pass, and go. I don't, so if you're actually at the school, you can go and talk to the athletic director and let them know, hey, I want to do this. I want to get into this. Can I have your help? And, very likely you're going to be met with no or little resistance and have the ability to get a lot of practice and learn from just real experience, which is really the best way that I've ever found to learn is go go to the game, interview people after, write a story about it, and post it, and then ask people for feedback. And you know, the more you read work of professional writers, if you're trying to get into writing, um, the more you'll be able to pick up on things that you should do, and the more people that you can find to read your story will only help you get better at it. If you're someone looking to kind of get into maybe say radio, you want to be a sports radio host, you love radio, um, similar thing you can do what I'm doing right now, start a podcast and treat it like it's a radio show. If you're at a high school level, um, you can probably be in the same type of position to try and have a coach on, have the football coach on, have basketball coaches on, talk to them about the team, what happened. You know, if you need to be proactive and let people know, hey, I want to do this. I want to get into radio. I want to be a radio host. Can you help me? For the most part, people are willing to help people that are passionate and have show interest in what they're doing if they can. Um, just reach out to whoever you can and try and just just give it a shot. Something else that you will face along beginning and continuing a career in media is um, getting used to people telling you no and really not caring about that. Um, it's something that takes time to get used to. You need to get into kind of a feeling of just really becoming numb to people telling you no. I think a lot of us are not not used to people saying no to you. Your parents probably try the best they can to make your life as easy as possible, which is awesome if that is the case. And you know, most of the time, um, things just happen, and you don't deal with a lot of situations where um, people say no to you a lot when you're younger. At least when it's things that are have to deal with um, work or school or stuff like that. But um, when you try to reach out to people, some people don't answer. Some people don't. Some people say no. Some people say they're busy. Some people can be rude about it. Some are nice about it. But you have to develop the feeling of just never getting, letting yourself get discouraged by the fact that, people are not willing to help. Um, so you just got to continue to send, emails, make phone calls, and just keep trying and keep going. And, eventually somebody's going to help you out. Um, and I said earlier, most people are going to help you. Um, Most people love to try and help out younger people, especially if they're, um, like myself. I love to, while I'm doing this podcast, I want to help younger people learn more and be better prepared to have careers and have great careers in sports media. Um, I reach out to people um, that have been in the industry a lot longer than me, and a lot of them get back to me, and um, it's a really nice feeling for me to hear back from them, and I'm sure it's nice for them to be able to help out a younger person because they were once that younger person reaching out to somebody who inspired them. So just be willing to ask questions because that's the only way that you're going to find, people to say yes and help you out. Um, Another, in the similar vein, if you're in high school, if you're looking to get into like on camera stuff, sports anchor on the news, or um, kind of like TV reporter stuff like that, you same thing. You should be at the games at your school, recording yourself. You can use your phone. Get a friend of yours to record you in front of the field, um, talking after the game, halftime of the game, and talk to the athletic director about, hey, can I come and take video of the game, the basketball game today? And I want to, make a little clip like you would see on the news or like you would see on SportsCenter, a little highlight reel. You talking over top of it, describing the plays, who won, interview with the coach or the player after. You can make it whatever you want to make it. However much you want to get into it or are willing to put into it is how much you'll get out of it. So the more you're able to do, the more, you're going to learn. You just need to be willing to, reach out to people and put the work in and spend your time on it. If you're someone who's in college, the options get a little easier. Or if you're somebody who's a senior in high school and you're looking at colleges, or maybe a junior in high school, because I guess we're getting close to college. I forget the college timeline of when you have to say you're going or not, as we're in January now. But if you're someone who's looking at colleges and looking at sports media, what you want to look for is a school that has, mostly every school has a student paper. If you're trying to write, or really in general, you should be involved in that if you're trying to get into media. It's only going to help you build connections and get potential internships in the future from that experience. But you should be making sure they have a student paper you can be involved in. For me, I got involved in the student paper in my school. We also had a TV studio where I was able to get involved with clubs that produced a news show where I was sports anchor for that. We had a radio station where I did play-by-play for our baseball and hockey teams and high school football that we broadcast on the radio. You want to be looking for schools that have, or programs that have things where you can get real experience. You want to make sure that they have, if you know what you want to do and I want to write, or I want to be on camera or on radio, or be a play-by-play anchor. make sure that they have what you want, because you need to know going in, I want to do this. This is how, this is what I have to do to get into that spot. And this school is going to help me get there. Um, if you don't know what you want to do, look for a school that has multiple options. Like I just laid out: radio station, TV station, student newspaper. You know, that will give you the ability to test things out. It's what I did. I knew I wanted to get into sports media. I transferred into the sports media program, and I got involved with the student paper and the radio station, the TV station, and I kept doing all of those while taking classes, and you know just tested them out and saw what did I like, what did I not like. I started to like less the play-by-play radio stuff. It wasn't really me, and the TV stuff was okay, but for me, where I found that I wanted to put more and more of my energy into was into writing, and I stuck with that. But if I didn't have the ability to try out all three, um, you know, they were just good opportunities for me. I learned more about research and preparation from doing the play-by-play stuff and having to talk for 3 hours, um, and have information about the players and teams. That kind of research helps me when I'm researching for a story that I'm doing, or doing the on-camera TV stuff helps me with what I'm doing now. Hosting a podcast, and the radio helps with that as well. But you know, talking, being in front of a camera, doing voiceover for videos that I do for video compliments to my stories. All those things kind of help each other, and they help you find what you eventually want to do. If you're in your teens or 18 right now, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I ended up going to Penn State for business, because that's what I was, raised in a family of people who went to Penn State for business degrees. My cousins all graduated from Penn State with business degrees. My brother graduated from there, and he works now. And, so I didn't know what I wanted to do. It took me leaving school and figuring out what I wanted to do, and eventually transferring, and then from there even more experiencing more things there to figure it out. So the earlier you can get into trying to figure out what you want to do, through more and more experience in high school or in college, it will give you a better resume and show your ambition and your passion and your willingness to try out different things and eventually find out where you want to go. And it will help you get there faster. Um, the thought process that I have and I go by is, it's better to just do something and be bad at it than it is to wonder and ponder about how to do it and what would be best if you did it. This podcast, I've thought about doing this podcast while I was in school and wanting to do this and talk to professors about it, trying to get something done, and went back and forth on it. And then when I got up here to York, where I live for my job now, thought about it some more and just decided to just do it, because I got sick of just thinking, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, I should do this before I do that, and just wasting time, not actually doing it. And this podcast may be terrible, might be good, I don't know, but I at least, I have a podcast. I host a podcast now, and in my future, that's only going to make me better, because the next time, every episode of this hopefully will be better. And in the future, anything else I do in terms of hosting podcasts or anything, it's only going to be better because of the experience. So you've got to get started on what you want to do, because it's the only way you're ever going to get to the end goal of where you want to be. So we start off the podcast here, basic steps of how to get started. Start writing for, if you're in high school, if you want to write, start writing for your high school paper, or start your own website, or start filming games and doing stand-up sideline interviews or reports if you want to be on TV, or start a podcast radio show. If you're in college, same steps with your student things on campus, or same thing. If you want to do it separately, start your own website or start your own podcast radio show. It doesn't have to be, school related things, but you need to start getting yourself into those things and starting to taste what it is for yourself. Get real experience and figure out what you want to do. And either way, if you're in college, high school, it doesn't matter. You can always start your own website, your own podcast, YouTube channel, whatever, covering, it doesn't have to be your high school or college. It could be pro stuff. If you want to start an NBA podcast or a fantasy football podcast or whatever you want to do, you've got to start to do something. Start with the beginning steps and just start to learn how to do it. It's the only way to get better. You could kind of paralyze yourself with trying to make sure everything is perfect. And I want to make sure that when I put this out, it's amazing and it's this and that. And, you can end up not putting out anything because you want to make sure it's perfect. That's something I've struggled with this thing you're currently listening to right now. If you're watching on YouTube, the podcast setup that you see behind me, this took me a while to put together, and I wanted to just get this podcast out, but I decided it should be on video. So then I had to find ways to create a studio to decorate, and that took more and more time away from when I should have just started the podcast. But the point is, just get started, do it, learn from it, and get better. And that's the point. I'm going to leave you with a quote that I think kind of sums up what we're going to do today. And we're trying to close every episode with a quote that kind of puts you in a good mindset of what we talked about and what I want you to do with what we talked about today to get you into the right mode for, starting your career. So where we go with today is, the quote is, if you're not doing what you can do right now, you'll never do what you really want to do later. And that's what we talked about in the beginning with figuring out why you want to do this. If you're not doing everything you can right now to put yourself in a position to be appealing to internships or jobs in the future, you're never going to get to that end goal. If you're doing something right now, you're covering something, that you don't want to cover. You have to treat it like it's the thing you want to eventually cover, because if you treat it like it's the level you're at now, you'll never reach that top level. I try and treat every high school game I go to like I'm covering something for ESPN, care about what you're doing as much as you can at every level, because if you don't, you'll never get to that top level. So get started, just get going now and figure it out as you go, because the longer you wait, the better the chances that somebody else gets started and now you're chasing them and you still don't know what you're doing. So Just get after it, get going. You'll learn as you go, and you'll only get better from it. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to episode number 2 of the Sports Media Student Podcast. Episode number 3, we're going to get into how to interview people. If you're going to get started with any kind of little media organization for yourself, you need to learn how to interview people if you're going to put out content. And if you've never interviewed somebody before, it can be a very stressful, agonizing process learning how to interview people. So we're going to jump into that in episode 3. But first, thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review. I'm your host, Rob Rose. Find me anywhere on social media at Rob Rose Sports. Thank you for listening. Rate, subscribe, review. Please download the podcast, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to. Thanks for listening. This has been the Sports Media Student Podcast. See ya.